This morning, just before I start, I'll tell you where we're going to be. We're going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 23, if y'all want to get there. Do y'all remember September 11th, 2001? It's one of those dates that's kind of like, do you remember where you were when the Challenger exploded? Right? Like you can picture exactly where you were. Right? I remember we had just moved from Florida to Pennsylvania. My 23-year-old was about 4 months old at the time. Crazy as all get out. I had just started working for a glass plant there in Pennsylvania. And it was an overnight shift. So I came home, I went to bed. I was just getting nice and cozy. And the phone rings. Nobody answers the phone. The phone rings again. Like, this is how detailed I remember this stuff. The phone rings again. And I'm going, can somebody answer the phone? The phone rings again. So I'm like, forget it, I'll pick it up. It's my father-in-law on the other end. He says, Tim, you need to turn on the news. So I turned on the news, and for those of you that are under 23 and have never heard what happened on September 11th, there were 4 airplanes that were hijacked by terrorists. 2 of them went into the World Trade Centers in New York City. 1 of them went into the Pentagon. And that's the ones that most of us remember, right? Like, really, we all remember those. And that's kind of the way it is with a lot of the Bible, right? We remember David. We remember Paul. We remember Peter. We remember the big ones, right? Let me ask you this. Do y'all remember a guy by the name of Todd Beam? Y'all remember his 2 words? Let's roll. Let's roll. Kind of that obscure piece of September 11th, right? That most of us don't think about. But here's an even more obscure name for you as you think about it. Lisa Jefferson. Y'all know who Lisa Jefferson is? Lisa Jefferson is the one that took that call that Tuesday morning. About 9:43 a.m., she took that phone call from Todd Beam. Let me ask you this. When terrorists with guns and men with guns are in your line of sight, what do you tend to do? I just stop. I do what they say. Right? That's not the case for Todd Beam. When he had heard what was happening, he and a couple of the passengers and some of the crew rallied together. And they ran to the roar. They ran into danger. I don't know too many folks that run to gunfire. I tend to hightail it the other direction. Right? Like, my mama always taught me, where there's smoke, there's fire, run. And so that's what I tend to do. That's the normal thing, really, that most of us would do. Could you imagine the stories that Lisa Jefferson is now able to tell her kids, her grandkids, on what had happened that morning on September 11th. It wasn't just the regular morning at work for her. She took the phone call that saved the Capitol. Think about that. It wasn't just a guy and a group of folks that thought, man, I know what to do. I know what's right to do in this situation. I think I should stand my ground. That's what I've been told. No. It's men that jumped into action. They proved it. They didn't just think about it. They didn't just know it. It wasn't a head knowledge. They did it. They went into the dangerous situation. They ran to the roar. That's what we're going to talk about this morning. Let's pray together first before we get started. God, we love you. We thank you that you are the God of the impossible. God, when things don't seem right, when things seem dangerous, God, you call us to action. So God, I pray this morning as we open your word that we would see this come to life for us as well. It's in your name that we pray. Amen. If I was going to tell you this morning, we're going to talk about a guy who killed a giant, killed a lion, and killed armies of men. Who would you think I'm talking about? David? Huh? David? Wrong. That's not who we're going to talk about. Second Samuel chapter 23. I told Austin Fleming earlier this week, I said, I bet you if I ask that question, most of the room is going to say David. But I'll tell you what, the interesting thing is that the man we're going to study this morning was David's bodyguard. When you're trying for that position, you can't just put, I went to the school of security at Jerusalem, and that be your resume. You've got to show that you proved it. David proved it, that he loved the sheep. He loved his nation. He loved his God. And that is the case with Benaiah. Have y'all ever watched a movie and you get to the end of it and the credits start rolling? What do y'all do? Do y'all watch the credits at the end of a movie? Not me. I ain't got time for that. I back my smart TV back up to Netflix. I see what the next movie is that looks good. Not my wife. No. She knows who the choreographer is for the fight scenes. She knows who the director is. She, like all that stuff, right? Like I might watch the credits at the beginning of the movie to get me to the movie. Half the time I'm fast forwarding through that so I can get to the good stuff. But that's the case so often when it comes to Scripture, right? We know that David killed a lion. We know that David killed Goliath. We know that David went after and defeated armies. Right? 2 Samuel chapter 23, verse 20 says this. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, was the son of a brave man from Kabzeel, a man of many exploits. Benaiah killed 2 sons of Ariel of Moab, and he went down into a pit on a snowy day and killed a lion. He also killed an Egyptian, an impressive man, Even though the Egyptian had a spear in his hand, Benaiah went down to him with a club, snatched the spear out of the Egyptian's hand, and then killed him with his own spear. These were the exploits of Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, who had a reputation among the three warriors. He was the most honored of the 30, but he did not become one of the three. David put him in charge of his bodyguard. If you look at the whole chapter of 2 Samuel 23, it's actually David's last words to Solomon before he dies. And he's recanting and rehearsing again the exploits of his mighty men, and then a group that David had known as the 30. Most of us know of David's three mighty men, the ones that went behind enemy lines, got him a cup of water, brought it back. But we don't know much about the 30. But here, let me just kind of give you some exploits of the three mighty men. Josheb was the son of Bashabeth. Time out. Imagine writing that name on your kindergarten paper every time you got to write your name on a piece of paper. And what kind of kidding did he get in middle school? But Josheb, scripture, the passage says, killed 800 men at one time. Eleazar was next, stayed with David to defeat the Philistines when all the men of Israel retreated. Imagine that. You and the king. But his hand was so tired that it stuck to his sword. They couldn't even unclench his fist from the sword. Shammah stood his ground in the middle of the field against the Philistines even after the troops fled. This is what I love about that passage. The Lord brought the victory. Wasn't anything about David, wasn't anything about Shammah, it was the Lord brought the victory. And then here's interesting, verse 18, Abishai. Interesting because he didn't make the cut, but he was their commander. He was Joab's brother. Think about this for a minute. He killed 300 men with a spear. He didn't have automatic ammunition. He had a spear and killed 300 men. And then starting in verse 20, it lists a group that's known as the 30. Why do they call it the 30? Well, because it always had 30 men. But Tim, somebody had to die at some point. Yep, they did. And then they replaced them with another one. There was actually 37 men total. In the 30, there was 37 because they had to replace them. Here's some interesting ones. Asahel, Joab's brother. Elihan, the son of Dodo. Think about that one for a minute. That was, as I was reading these, I just thought it was, man, these are some funny names as you walk down through. You can read the list of them there through chapter 23. But we're going to look at this morning Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, and what his excerpts are. Do y'all love lions? Let me just ask. Do you like lions? I like lions. Behind a fence. I don't do safaris. I've never been to Africa. I don't need to go to Africa and do a safari. I have friends of mine and Becky's that have gone on multiple safaris. No thanks. I've seen some videos. Nah, I'm good with them behind a fence. But here's the reality. As we look at the Word of God, so often we look at it in what psychologists call hindsight bias. Have y'all ever looked at things through hindsight bias. Earl and I were talking about it this morning, and we called it Monday morning quarterback, right? We look at something from yesterday, and man, this could have been better. That could have been better. This makes sense. That doesn't make any sense. Hindsight bias. We look at the Bible this way. Moses crossing the Red Sea. Duh. Why are the Israelites all murmuring? Why are they mad at Moses? Put yourself in those shoes. You got the Egyptians coming behind you. You have a body of water in front of you that ain't split yet. Right? Put yourself in those shoes. Instead of getting mad at the children of Israel, put yourself in those shoes. We look at Peter through hindsight bias. Duh, Peter, why don't you get out of the boat in the middle of the lake? Anybody else want to do that? Not me. I grew up 15 minutes from Lake Erie. Been on lots of boats. I don't just step foot out in the middle of the lake. But most of us are going, why didn't the other 11 get out of the boat too? Hindsight bias. Right? It just makes sense as we study the Word of God and we see what happens and we see the victories that they have. Why didn't the children of Israel go after Goliath? Why did they send a little teenage boy? Well, hindsight bias. But let's look at that in the life of Benaiah this morning. Benaiah goes, kills warriors of Moab. The one that just intrigues me is this. He went down into a pit on a snowy day, and he killed a lion. The lion didn't jump into the pit after Benaiah. The lion was already there. How many of y'all going to jump in a pit with a lion? Let me give you just a couple intriguing things as you think about that this morning. A lion can run 35 miles per hour. Y'all ever run 35 miles an hour? I'm lucky to get up to like 4 or 5. They can leap 30 feet in a single bound. I have video proof. I'm not going to show it. But I tried jumping from here to just the floor. I ended up in the front row. They can leap 30 feet just in a single bound. They have a bite force. Think about this. 650 to 1,000 pounds per square inch is their bite. They can swing at around 18 feet a second with 4,000 to 10,000 pounds of force. Here's what's interesting. He's in a pit, so the light is dim. Their eyesight is 6 to 8 times better than humans in low light conditions. They can weigh up to 500 pounds. So as Benaiah is coming up to the pit, if you think about it, think about the movie that's happening here, right? Let's just go here. You're watching this movie, and you see the lion in the pit, and you see Benaiah go up. What's your reaction when he stands at the edge of the pit? Don't do it, dude. Don't do it. And then he turns around and he walks the other direction, and we all breathe a sigh of relief. He's not such a big idiot as we thought. He has his head screwed on straight, and he walks away. But it's not to go run in the other direction. It's to gain momentum. And he runs and jumps into the pit. When he jumps into the pit, can he stop halfway through and go, I don't think I should have done this? He can't. He's all in at that point. He is all in. He knows what he has to do to protect himself, his family, maybe sheep. Maybe it's the king. Maybe it's David he's protecting. We don't know based on this, but we know that he jumps into a pit. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1 says this: faith is the reality of what is hoped for, the proof of what is not seen. Here's the reality. Faith involves us making a step before we know what the next step is going to be. It involves us taking a step before we know maybe even what the end result is going to be of that step. Again, we look at hindsight bias. Joshua, why did it take you so long to cross the Jordan River? Didn't you see God split the Red Sea? Why did it take you so long? Well, because God didn't split the Jordan River. It took Joshua taking a step. And then that piece split. But guess what? He had to take the next step before that next step split. And the next step. And the next step. We see it's not something that is always seen ahead of time. Sometimes this is interesting, the Jordan River is only 100 feet wide. Did you know that? The Jordan River is only 100 feet wide. Can you imagine if Joshua didn't take that first step? 100 feet between wilderness wandering and the promised land. It's dangerous sometimes, but we have to take that step. I'm going to make a prediction right now. Later in life, you're going to have some regrets. Anybody have regrets already? Yeah. Here's the reality, though. In the short term, the action regret, man, I wish I wouldn't have done that. I wish I wouldn't have said that. I got emotionally tempered. The action regret kind of cancels out the inaction regret. I wish I would have done this. In the short term, it's a 53% action regret. I wish I wouldn't have done that. To 47% inaction. But here's the reality in the long term. It far outweighs itself. It far outweighs itself. 16% action regret. Man, I wish I wouldn't have done that. But at 84% inaction regret. Man, I wish I would have shared the gospel with my friend. Man, I wish I would have shared the gospel with my neighbor. Man, I wish I would have shared the gospel with my, you fill in the blank. I wish I would have done this. Imagine Benaiah gets to the end of his life and he says, I saw the lion, but I went the other way. The inaction regret that would have been there. I saw the warriors and they were scary, and I didn't face them. The inaction regret. What is that today for you? Here's another interesting thing, and we're going to get into it here in a second. But have y'all ever looked at cows and buffalo? Here's an interesting thing I learned in the last couple weeks. Did you know that cows run away from storms? They run away from them. You want to know the difference? Buffalo run towards them. They run into the storm. There's a lot of times Becky and I will be driving somewhere, and if y'all ever driven and had a storm kind of following you, and you're just on the front end of it, and you're like, man, I can never get out of this thing. But if you turn around and go the other direction, it seems like it's like 5 minutes and you're through the storm. If you're running from the storm and the danger, it's going to be a lifelong process. But if we face it knowing that God is there with us, we're able to get through it. I made the outline real easy for you this morning. Did y'all see that? 1 point, 1 action point. I told Sean this week, I said, I'm not going to be a Baptist pastor. I'm going to have 1 point, not 3, 4, 5, 6, 10. I'm going to have 1. Don't hold back. Don't hold back. Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, was the son of a brave man from Kabzeel, a man of many exploits. He killed 2 sons of Ariel of Moab. I'm going to stop right there. Most commentators say that those men weren't just men in the army, men in the ranks. They were warriors. They were strong men that most men would run from. Even military men would have run from them. Benaiah faces 2 of them and kills them both. Big men. And then he went down into a pit and killed the lion. How many of y'all ever seen a small lion? Pretty rare that you see cubs, right? Like, zoos are like, cubs are cute. But the people want to hear the roar. Meh. That ain't what people want. Right? Like, when Beck and I go to the zoo, man, the Albuquerque Zoo is something really cool. If y'all been, plug that for a second, but it's really cool. But I'm constantly, like, I will stay around that lion exhibit for a while until I start to hear that grumble. And then every once in a while you hear the roar happen. The grumble is enough to, like, get you shaking for a minute. But we think, man, that's a big animal. We even have terms in the English that kind of show this even more, right? We call it the elephant in the room. Who wants to talk about the elephant in the room? Nobody wants to address the elephant in the room. Why? Because it's big. It's confrontational. Sometimes, if it's an elephant in the room with your boss, it might be dangerous. Right? So we don't want to address the elephant in the room. We don't want to jump in the pit with the lion. Because those animals are too big. And they are for me. But what if I've got God? But I forgot about that one. Too often we do. We forget about the size of our God against the size of what we're facing. One author that I read said this: when we lack the guts to go after the 500-pound lion in our life, we rob God of the glory he deserves. But imagine as we read down through this, the stories that Benaiah is able to tell his kids, his grandkids, of what God has done in his life because he faced the dangerous stuff. But here's the interesting thing. I told you we're going to talk about a man who went against armies and killed warriors, killed a lion, and he killed a giant. Verse 21. He also killed an Egyptian, an impressive man. Most commentators say was a giant, at least 7.5 feet tall. Even though the Egyptian had a spear in his hand, Benaiah went down to him with a club, snatched the spear out of the Egyptian's hand, and then killed him with his own spear. Do y'all know Madeline Miller that sits over here with the Moores every once in a while? Her dad is a great man. I love David Miller. I was telling Maddie this morning, I said, if there's somebody that lives in Iowa that can be part of an Albuquerque family, I feel like her dad is one of those guys with our church. Like, her dad is just great. But David is tall. I don't feel short very often. But when David's here, I feel pretty short. And a friend of mine, one of my best friends from Bible college, is a boxer. We were talking about it this week. What fighting that giant would have looked like. So, 7.5 feet tall, Egyptian man with a spear. And most commentators say that the average Jewish male at that time was about 5.5 feet tall. That's 2 feet difference. In fighting, there's a understanding with fighters. They call it the rule of the tape. And what that is it's the reach of the other fighter. The taller I am, guess what? The longer reach I have. So the giant is 7.5 feet tall to a 5.5 foot Benaiah. All the giant has to do is, have you ever watched a kid fight with an adult and the adult just kind of puts their hand on the kid's head and holds them out here and the kid's like swinging and doing all this stuff? That's all the giant would have had to do. But Benaiah gets so close to the giant, he takes the giant's spear and kills him with his own spear. How many of y'all will be confident enough, when he went to the fight, he didn't have the spear? He had a club. Y'all ever hear the saying, you brought a knife to a gunfight? When he would have thrown that club, it might have hurt the giant and just made him mad. But it wouldn't have done anything, and then he had to get close enough to grab the club again and go back and try again. But no, the giant doesn't even launch the spear at Benaiah, and Benaiah gets close enough to grab it and kill him with it. That is only God. To give him the courage to get that close. To give him the power to take the spear from the giant. But here's the thing that I've read and read and read and heard. When God calls you to face the danger, you better know it's God's calling. But when you've made sure it's God's calling, you better do it. You better do it. Again, when we lack the guts to face the 500-foot lion, we rob God of the glory. So here's the action step. Risk it all. Risk it all. Why? Because there's two lions that we see. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8 says this. Be sober-minded, be alert. Your adversary, the devil, is prowling around like a roaring lion, looking for anyone he can devour. Who's the adversary? The devil. He's walking around like a lion, seeking whom he may devour. Matthew 28:18 says, Jesus came near and said to them, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. But how many of y'all like the back of the book sometimes? When I was in grade school, I used to always read the back of the book. And then my mom would get mad at me because my little summary on my book report pretty much mirrored the back of the book that kind of told everything. I love to read the back of the book. Revelation chapter 12. The end of the movie, if you will, of our lives and of the world. Revelation. Chapter 12, verse 9 says this. So the great dragon was thrown out, the ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the one who deceives the whole world. He was thrown to earth and his angels with him. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, the salvation and power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have now come, because the accuser of our brothers and sisters who accuses them before our God day and night has been thrown down. They conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, for they did not love their lives to the point of death. Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and you who dwell in them. Woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has gone down to you with great fury, because he's known his time is short. So I have this question for you. Which enemy are you following? Or which lion are you following? The one that seeks to devour, or the one that will be triumphant? Which one are you running to? I told Jerry this week, as we were going through what this morning looked like, was the first time that I heard that first song that we sang. I've heard Crown Him with Many Crowns hundreds of times. But man, that chorus. All hail, Redeemer, hail, for he has died for me. His praise and glory shall not fail throughout eternity. Majesty, Lord of all, let every throne before him fall. The King of kings, O come adore our God who reigns forevermore. It may look dangerous in your life. But church, let me ask you this. Are we willing to jump into the pit?